Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the podcast. Now, I recently had an opportunity to speak on a panel that was talked about music licensing and music synchronization. I had people from Warner, from Cobalt, and a sync agent who was moderating. His name is Mark. It was a pleasure, and we were speaking at Meta Facebook offices down here in Miami. It was a great experience, and here's the audio. I hope you can learn from it, and I hope you're having an amazing, beautiful day.
First of all, I want to thank the MMF for inviting us to do this sync panel. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you, Meta, for hosting us. All right, so before we begin and I introduce you to everybody, I want us to get a little bit of an idea of where you sit in terms of your knowledge of sync and who you are. So with that said, tell us who you are first. How many people here are artists? How many people here are managers? Okay, great. So we're talking to managers basically. What about labels or publishers? Okay, any sync agencies? No sync agencies, just me. Okay, all right, so we'll move on from that. So out of everybody here, who has actually had one of their songs from their artists synced? Okay, so a fairly good number. Okay, so for all of you who haven't, we'd like to do two things on this panel, I think. The first thing is just give you a practical idea of how sync works. And second, just to give you an idea of some specific trends around technology and also around, because we're in the center of the Latin market for America, a little bit of an idea of what's going on in the Latin market too, because I think that's important for everybody here and the international market in general. All right, so with that said, I'm really excited to begin this. I'll introduce myself first. My name's Mark Frieser. As Sharon said, I have a company called Sync Summit. Sync Summit is an educational company. We do a lot of online events and courses. On the other side of it, and the side which is more fun, I would say, is we work as a sync agency with a lot of labels and publishers and managers throughout the world. And we also work doing music supervision for primarily film and advertising. So that's where my expertise comes from. But more important is the expertise from our panel. So I want to start off with you, Ajani. First of all, thank you for being here. It's so great to meet you.
No problem. You too.
Thanks. So tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, hey everybody. So my name's Akil Ajani, or Ajani. I'm a music supervisor, and I've had the pleasure of music supervising.
So thank you so much, MMF, for inviting me. My name's Mari Nunez. I work for Warner Chappell Music. I oversee their creative for US Latin and also Latin America copyrights, but we go a little further in terms of publishing. We do also an area called creative services. So publishing, and I'm sure Jose will say this, we're not just holders of rights. It's like a win-win kind of work together type of piece, especially with managers. And previous being with Warner Chappell, I was at Sony Music Latin for about 11 years and kind of established sync and biz dev over there back in the day, back in 2007. So it's really great to be here. I'm excited.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Jose?
Hi everyone, my name is Jose Mayel, and like they said, I work at Kobo Music. I oversee sync for Latin America, US Hispanic market, and I've had, in my experience, I've been also at BMG. I was there for 7 years in New York, and my role is basically pitching and licensing for all medias in Latin America, and mainly advertising and pitching for film, TV, and video games.
Excellent. Okay, so that gives everybody a good introduction. So let's get right into the heart of the issue that Sharon asked us about, which is, okay, how do you make money? There's a lot that goes into that, right? It's like you license music. But in terms of licensing music, let's start off with this. What are some of the major trends that you've seen over the past year in terms of the usage of, I'm assuming most people here work with independent artists. So let's talk about independent artist licensing versus licensing from known artists. And I think all of us can look at that from our perspective. So whoever wants to start off, please go ahead.
I mean, if I can, what I think is that it all depends on the market, of course, and it all
Right.
depends on the media, because different markets, like the U.S. is very specific in terms of the music that they consume, or the supervisors consume, or the way that they look at music sometimes for their projects than what we see in Latin America. So the trends are all very different. But if there's one thing that I've noticed is that there's a lot more hunger right now for music from around the world for productions, not only in the U.S. but productions in Latin America too, or productions in Paris, in London. There's a lot more. I get a lot of requests now from our international offices or European offices, and they're like, hey, listen, what do you have for this film? And they're looking for really cool indie Latin tracks, or something that is like electro cumbia, or they're looking for so many cool things, because supervisors are getting so much now. There's so much music out there that it makes it really exciting.
Jose, I think that's a really interesting point, because what I've seen as a trend, and everybody please add into this, but what I've seen as a trend, and it really started at the beginning of the pandemic, is that because I think it was fueled by streaming networks expanding their markets into Latin America, as well as in Europe, Africa, and East Asia, you've seen an explosion of usage on the local level. And what that has meant is a lot more opportunities for people who are creating and managing music within those markets to connect their music to opportunity. That's one side. The other side is that you have seen, I would say, an explosion of music supervisors in Latin America, because 3 years ago we only had in Mexico, I would say maybe 2 or 3 music supervisors that you could think of. Now there's lots of them.
And I think we need even more.
Yes,
Right.
Yeah,
and we're
I have to say the one market that's like suffering for supervision is Brazil.
It's Brazil.
It's Brazil, which is like a big chunk of the piece for Latam. You know, Latin America is such a vast marketplace.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of supervisors in Mexico, as you mentioned. In Colombia, we're seeing a big uptick in a lot of productions
Yes.
there. Argentina now has really great supervision happening. Chile is a little lack on the film and TV side.
I think a lot of it goes
But the
to-
advertising side is booming in Latam right now.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, Latin America right now is experiencing a massive growth, like 13% over year, which is big in the international setting, you know. So if you have artists, writers, you know, you should definitely get them in front of supervisors and your publishers. You know, talk actively with your publishers so they know what your music is, what's new, and your catalog. Catalog is golden right now. We're seeing a massive uptick in that space.
Yeah.
Well, I think going off of what you were saying, I think the trend actually started way before. I just think the pandemic kind of, I guess, with the usage of media and the demand for it, it opened up the doorway.
Great point.
But the trend in the growth of Latin music started way before it. For example, Despacito, right? I mean, that was a song that was, or it's been the number one song, I guess, in the last 10 or 20 years. And that was like, before then, the last song that was a Spanish language song was probably, I think, 94 in the early 90s. So it's been 20 years. And I also think when I look at the market, it's also the demographic shifts and changes that happen in the United States. And I think being that the United States is such, I guess, quote unquote, superpower, it has influence all over the world. I think that also kind of influences that, especially with the Spanish language in media, across media, not just music, but all across media is influencing the world. So that's my take on it. But the trends of Latin music and Latin media, that started way before.
I think you're absolutely right. Is that Latin music became pretty much mainstream a long time ago. It's just in terms of its usage in film and TV and ads, I think that the growth of it has really been probably more short term.
Right.
I think that's the only real difference there, but it's just as ubiquitous as any other type of music.
Of course.
Yeah.
I
So
think, yeah.
Brazil, for a second, It's an interesting side note because everybody here, I would assume, is doing business with the Latin market. I'm going to make that assumption for the most part, in one way or another. Brazil, it's interesting because I only know 2 music supervisors in Brazil, and I know about 3 other people who know how to do a deal. And this is a market of over 200 million people.
Yeah, it's like one of the most important centers outside of Mexico City. Sao Paulo is a massive consumption of music and population. But, Brazil itself too, like they're huge consumers. They look towards the US in terms of like tendencies and trends, not so much to Europe, whereas like markets like Argentina and Chile, they do still look more towards trends in Europe.
Right.
And then when you look at the Andean region, Mexico and the Central America, they're obviously looking more towards the trends that are happening here in the US. So yeah, I feel like it's important as managers to kind of know where you see a lot of productions, reading magazines, like Variety, being really hip to kind of like seeing what's happening in the market with original content. Content is just blossoming.
I think Netflix also sends, or there's a few of the streaming companies that they send out some of the lists of productions that they have in pre-production, so that you see exactly what the projects are and what's what you can pitch music to.
Yeah, pitching is a big piece of what we do. We listen obviously to what specific the needs are as publishers, and on the creative side, we listen like tempo, vibe, feeling, if they want something from the past or they want something current. And then a lot of times I tell a lot of our writers, because of the pandemic, we've kind of gone back to retro. We're really living in this moment of, 80s and 90s.
80s and 90s are back.
They're back really big. So
Covers
be
from
open
90s
to
and
doing
80s.
covers, be open to having adaptations of your songs done in other languages, because that's hot right now in Hollywood. Like that is something we get requested all the time.
Well, I mean, I truly believe as someone who works in media, I think, covers or doing adaptations of your music is a powerful thing, because, you're taking one song or one concept and you're expanding lifeline of that copyright. So, for example, you could have, let's say you put a pop record and then you do an acoustic record. As a music supervisor, we want to see what you can offer. And when we're doing our work, we might say, hey, that works with that. So, we can adapt that into the film. And it's all about the vibe. It's all about the mood. But on my side is also, trying to figure out what works in the scene. So I say you have a popular song and the director wants to use that song and it doesn't fit. But let's say you have another version of that song and it fits, then it works for me. It makes my job easier.
That's such a good point. And just to give you guys a little bit of an information snippet, and this is going to segue into something we were going back and forth about, but in the Japanese market where I do a lot of work, 5 of the 10 biggest syncs on the publishing side have been well-known songs from the US and abroad. Songs like YMCA. Basically what they do is they do a native language version of it and a reimagination of the instrumentation. And those on the publishing side have become some of the mainstays year after year of how people on the publishing side have generated money. And a lot of the artists that do these are artists that people don't know about. So there's a big opportunity for every artist to go out there and reimagine something that's been done, not just in English, but also doing it specifically in another language for other markets. So, Mary, this leads to what we were talking about. You've seen a lot of success with people specific to covers in doing reimaginations in Spanish and Portuguese, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, I think what's important for managers is to kind of like talk to their publishers. If your artist has a deal with the publisher, ask them, hey, I'd like to see what your top, 20 tracks are globally, and then present that to some of your writers, present that to some of your artists to see the possibility of reimagining the songs. I'll give you an example. Ricky Martin, he did Livin' La Vida Loca, 25 years ago. That song is written by Draco Rosa with Desmond Child.
Yeah.
So it's a 50-50 track, but we've had that song like reimagined through a female vocal, and made it very like frenetic and dark and scary because there's a lot of really dark contents being developed as well.
Yeah.
And directors and producers like that. They like the fact that they can play with different styles of music and have different melodic vibes depending on what their projects are. So I think it's important to have a very open vision globally, not just think what's happening in the Latin music right now. Yes, Latin music is super hot, it's exploding, but we have to be really strategic sometimes when we're sending pitches. You know, we can't just send, you know, a bachata track if they're looking for like a regional Mexican scene, right? So like we have to be very, very, very conscious of
And
genre.
if you do, you tend to annoy the music supervisor.
Well, that is basically losing your one shot, because if I'm asking you
Yeah.
for Cuban music and you send me Colombian music,
Right.
I know the difference. If I'm a music supervisor, or certainly the person that I'm working with, the showrunner, knows the difference between Cuban salsa and Colombian salsa.
Right.
So at the end of the day, that's a deal breaker. That's going to be the
Yeah.
last time that music supervisor talks to you, because they can't take you seriously.
But that opportunity will come up for that bachata track.
Yeah.
You know, so like I think it's about having like a treasure chest, right, of different songs that you can, you know,
Right.
draw from.
I think the most important thing when you're approaching a music supervisor is actually doing your homework. You know, going on sites like IMDb and checking out, like typing a music supervisor, or let's say you have a track that might fit a particular TV show. Go on IMDb or any other site, any reputable site, look at what the music supervisor does, or Google, and see what type of work they're doing or have done. You know, some music supervisors, they stick to, like, they'll just do reality TV shows, or some are just like across the board. But that will give you an insight. But the most important thing when you're approaching a music supervisor is be prepared. Because I get messages every day. I can log on to LinkedIn or wherever, and I'm getting messages where people are like, hey, well, I have a classical album or whatnot, and they don't even take the time to even ask what I'm working on. So, I mean, for me, going through all those messages and just replying, and it takes up a lot of time. It takes up a lot of time, and
Nobody has time.
and not doing your due diligence in understanding what I need. It wastes your time. You just spent money on LinkedIn Premium to send me a message, and I can help you at this current time. So it's so important. It's so important.
I think maybe, what's the best way for a management team to procure briefs from you? Like, how can we best?
Go ahead, Ajani,
Yeah.
and then I'll give a little bit of an answer too.
Yeah.
Well, for me personally, when I'm working on a music supervising project, right now I'm directing, so that's not really my focus. Yeah, I might have one or two projects where I'm music supervising right now, but right now I'm focusing on directing. So when I'm looking for music, I use LinkedIn, but also people I know, like, relationship building is so important. I'll give a call, send an email, send out a brief, and say, here's what I'm working on. Do you have any music for me? That's how I personally do it.
There's another organization called the Music Supervisors Guild, which they're based in Los Angeles, and they actually have their awards coming up next week in LA. They too have great resources for people to kind of like find out briefs. Your publishers, if you're self-published, it's a little bit more difficult, but your publishers should be able to provide you like TV shows, things that are related to Latin music, or, you know, of Latin kind of, how should you say, sensibility. It doesn't have to be, because I find like those of us that do pitching, a lot of our songs are in Spanish or in Portuguese, and we have to push through a lot of times, you know, with like tempo, vibe, feeling, have instrumentation available.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say, you know, because when we reach out to music supervisors, like they said, I go to music supervisors and ask them all the time, hey, what projects are you working on? I don't wanna waste their time. If they have projects they're working on, they're like, hey, listen, I got this project, I need music from this era. check out this playlist that will give you like a sense of what the sound of the project is, what is the DNA of sound for it, and then you send them ideas from your catalog. But we've had to build that relationship for like, we've been in the industry for like years and years and years, and that takes for them to trust your musical taste, to trust that you're not going to be sending them just stuff because it's your priority.
Right.
But they're trying to create something like the sound element and adapt it to a visual, and for that they're like painting with the music, and it has to be what they need. Ultimately, we can pitch a lot, and we try to be as accurate as possible when we're pitching, but it's their decision on what they use, and you always have to respect that, because that's we feel like a lot of the time we're not really competing, because we have a lot of songs that we publish in common.
We talk to each other too. Publishers talk to each other a lot.
Hey, have you heard about this thing or have you heard about this production, or are you in touch with them? Reach out to them, and we're always talking, and we're always trying to place music, but ultimately it's the music supervisor.
Yeah, and I tell people too, like, we love TV. We watch TV. If you don't watch TV, get the app. Apple Music is creating amazing content, and it's all over the world. Look at not just Netflix, but look at Amazon Prime, look at Hulu, look at, all these different applications, because I think, sometimes it's just a little research on your part to kind of check out and see what's out there in terms of content.
If a friend of mine who works at a label, he really wanted to connect with a music supervisor who was working on the Spookies. And he was like, I'm a big fan of the show. I want to send something to them, but I want to do it in a way that it doesn't come up. So he reached out to them on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and he noticed doing some research that they had won an award as a supervisor. So he congratulated them on that. He said, I really love this show, and I also love this other show that you had working on. If you ever have opportunities, I would love to send you music for it. I would love to meet with you at some point. And I feel like music supervisors are people just like we are. They would love to meet you if it's a genuine, and it's just like.
Yeah, if it's genuine.
Well, here's the thing also, and touching back on that point is, you have to build relationships. So it's a long-term game. I think of what a lot of people, the mistake they make is if they're in it for themselves, so they just here. But that really hurts the relationship, because for me, like I tell artists all the time, or anybody, I'm gonna go to the people that I know. I'm gonna hit up my friends that in the music industry or my colleagues, and if I need something, they'll go into their network. So that is so important, and I guess that's for most people. I would say that's probably the case for most supervisors. So that is something that's really, really important.
Ajani, I'm really glad you brought that up, because I want to take the view out to about 50,000 feet here to give you guys some practicalities in terms of connecting with people, and then we can drill down into them. But the first thing is, this is a really interesting point, Ajani, because a lot of people will look at the world of music supervision, meet music supervisors, find music supervisors, and kind of treat them like letterboxes at a post office and throw the same thing at every single person. And that is just a recipe for failure. So I think one of the biggest points that I would take away from what Ajani said is that you have to treat people like human beings. Research them. Know who they are. Don't be creepy about it, but know who they are. Know what their projects are. Look them up, like he said, on IMDb. Also, take a look at, and I have a whole list of resources that I'll send everybody here after the event. But go to places like tunefind.com. Go to places like iSpot.tv for ads. Go to deadline.com, which is a great resource for knowing what's going on in productions in advance. And by doing this, you'll be able to research who exactly is Jen Malone and what does she work on. I mean, I don't know if you know Jen Malone, but she's one of many music supervisors, and she does some really cool work. And
Nora Felder from Stranger Things. I mean, she's been everywhere.
Well, so many people.
Yeah.
You get to know who these people are as people, and you know their projects. So that, for me, is the first step of what you have to do. The other thing is, I personally really hate the phrase pitching, because, first of all, going back to Ajani's point again, 90% of how we do business is really a music supervisor gets in touch with me, and like some music supervisor got in touch with me this morning, and he's like, Mark, listen, I need some 60s music from Korea. Do you have any for me? I've got a deadline in 3 days. And I'm like, okay, I'll shoot you off some stuff that we can clear. That's how most of our business goes. It's not like, oh, there's a database of briefs.
Yeah. Our
now,
business
some
is like
people
24
send out
hours.
briefs,
It's like, constant.
but people
turning
will
over.
be constantly getting in touch with each other. So with that said, with that practicality, the question is, how do you, as somebody who's coming in as a manager or somebody who's working with an independent artist, connect into that circle of trusted people that Ajani and other music supervisors actually talk to and work with? So I'm going to put you on the spot first on that question.
Just connect with them. Just like how you would meet somebody down the street. I think that's the most important thing. And also, like I said, long term. And I think a key point that is so important, just because I might turn you down or say I might not have music for you on this project, does not mean we won't work a year down the line.
Yeah.
That's right.
So, but the most important thing is to keep in contact with the music supervisors. And obviously it's a numbers game. So, but I guess you have to find that balance between that numbers game, but also having real relationships with people. But you have to get your feet wet, and you have to get in there, and you actually have to make friendships with people in sync and music supervisors.
Yeah. And I think what's important too is like us as publishers, is having great relationships with independent labels, with managers, with labels. Again, not just here in Miami, but in Los Angeles. There's like a matrix, right? The matrix for us, for example, in the US is we have great relationships with our brands and licensing teams in New York, because that's predominantly where all the brands and licensing happens.
Yeah.
But we also have great relationships with our LA teams. A lot of our business, happens. I would say maybe like a good 8, well, at least at Warner Chappell, a lot of our business comes from California. A lot of it comes from the West. A lot of it comes from Mexico. Here on the East Coast, we do a lot of business with advertising because the car companies and a lot of the beverage companies are
where they
located.
are.
And Puerto Rico is a huge market. Puerto Rico is like on fire right now. People forget about Puerto Rico. People forget about the DR. That's part of us here. That's part of that matrix that we should be reaching out to. It's very, very.
I mean, the only other thing that I would say is that the way to, meet music supervisors also is, if a lot of your music has already been synced, that's right there is a connection, because they like the music of your artist for a specific project. You can reach out to them and just continue building on that relationship so that there's more opportunities in the future. But also go to all the events where all the music supervisors are, or talk to your label and publisher and hey, is there an event, or hey, invite supervisors to a show, or anything like that. It's always good.
And being open, taking, if you're a singer-songwriter or your artist has that capability of doing acoustics, advertising loves that. We've taken writers and artists to visit big agencies. Hispanic Heritage Month is in October. Be open to doing those kind of opportunities. Be open to doing LGBTQ. Really find out about what your artist's interests are and kind of really dial in on that as well. I think that's important. That happened with Echo, for example. Yvette Medina was talking about that. During the pandemic, Lexus was looking to do a diverse campaign with a Korean artist to represent Asian Americans, a Latino, and in this case Echo got selected, and also really great producers, African American producers, which they were Nova Wave, which they're ours. But work with a center of people that also are open to doing general market. Don't feel like you just have to do the Latin market.
Well, I'll also say use social media. You can really target and reach people. So I would say in your marketing mix, however you decide to create content or build your marketing strategy, uh, develop part of that toward music supervisors. Like I the other day I saw a sync agent talk about advertisers were looking for artists that were just more than someone who just produces music. They want someone with a brand, so that they can use that to leverage, and when they sync their music, they can leverage off of that. So that's one thing you can think of. But going back to it is that you can target music supervisors, people in sync, in a way that they can see you, and you can start developing those conversations. And if they see you and they like your music, they can contact you, and now it becomes a two-way street rather than, hey, I'm an artist. Do you have an opportunity for me?
Right.
And just going into the sync world in without having an idea of direction.
Yeah, that is such a great point. And the other thing that I want to talk about for a second, everybody, is sync agencies, because we've talked around them to this point. I'm a sync agent. I work with everybody from individual artists to Avex, which is one of the biggest labels in the world. But my process is the same. We do two things. One thing we do is that when people get in touch with us and they say, hey, Mark, I need X type of music. Do you know how to help me? I either am able to help them or I send them to somebody else who I think can help them. So basically, my motto is, if the song doesn't fit, don't submit. Okay, apologies to Johnny Cochran. But moving on from that, that's when I'm asked for it, because when I've been a music supervisor on projects, which I am time to time, nothing is more frustrating than putting something out to the world and saying to a few people, listen, I need some music, like 1950s swing music in Italian. And then what I get back is Italian disco from 1983. I get back modern Italian music. I get back some orchestral Italian music and some opera. I'm like, okay, how obvious was this search? But what happens every time that somebody puts a search out there is that they end up getting a lot of sort of, musical flotsam and jetsam for them, because they're looking for something specific. So when you do have that opportunity, make sure you connect to it properly, and if you don't have the music, send it to someone else. I always do that. The other thing is, if you're proactively pitching, okay, now I'm using pitching, but if you're proactively pitching to somebody, everything that we said in terms of taking a personal approach is super, super important. But also, be brief about when you're sending something. Don't send a long email. Basically, introduce yourself and who you are, the artists you work with. Send them a link that doesn't expire, that allows downloading and allows streaming.
And has metadata,
Right.
has
That was the
information
other
about
thing.
your music. I think, in sync, a lot of people think, this track, we get tracks sent to us all the time. And, I tell the managers, I'm like, listen, man, I need the splits. I'm not going to send something to a supervisor that's not like, at least the gist is kind of there, Send the instrumentals too. I mean, it's important to have those both, because they're mixing to picture.
That's the other thing that I was going to ask. It's very, very important when we get the audio to get always instrumentals, because when you're editing to picture, there's voiceover, and sometimes the lyrics of the song, they don't fit, so you have to cut around it. It's not that they want to, exclude the lyrics. It's just that it's not gonna work. And always have instrumentals, always have the audio, and if you can send things to people way ahead of time, it's better. There are projects like
video
FIFA
games.
is
Yeah,
working.
video games are
is
way
looking
out.
for music for like 6-7 months,
Mm-hmm.
and if you get the music to them 3 months before, you have a chance. You can't send something to FIFA a week before they're going out, or you can't send anything for most medias, or like films. How long
Films
have they been
take about a
working on
year.
2,
Fast and
3.
Furious.
Fast and
Well,
Furious?
like
being
just
on-
example is coming up now. This is the last one, by the way. But we've been working on it for a year, and we sent over 200 tracks. Believe it or not,
We set up writing camps. We set up like everything.
writing
It's
camps.
just-
Be open to the writing camps too, guys, because film likes original music.
Well,
Yeah.
Just
And
be
it's,
open.
well, when it comes to film, also, it's going to take a long time.
Yep.
So, like, if you, let's say you send something and you don't hear anything back, I might be working with it, but that doesn't mean I forgot about you. But also make sure you just don't disappear off the planet, because I've worked with any. This happened to me a couple of times. I worked with independent artists. We're about to sync the song, and they disappear.
Yeah.
So I'm like, and we talked about it. We talked about it. We came to agreement, and then when the director is ready to go, asking me for the licensing and whatnot, I'm like, where does this guy go? So I'm like sitting there, everything's idle. The director is waiting, and so the main thing, if you're gonna do that, make sure you have maybe an admin or somebody or a company or publishing company, whatever you choose, to administer that track. And so if you go on vacation for a month, when I come, your copyright is ready, your contracts are ready, and I'm ready to go. So that's something most important. I think for independent artists and also managers who manage independent artists.
It's such an important point. And also, I'll say to everybody here, if you're an independent artist or a manager working with independent artists, I have a directory of sync agents. Of course, I'm in it, but we also have about another 20 that I have vetted, that have deals that are decent and do business in the industry regularly. So there'll be people that are good connections. So if you need that, just get in touch with me and I'll send you our directory of sync agents. Another couple of points I just wanted to touch on. One point, in terms of the Guild of Music Supervisors, I'm going to send you a link to their Friends of the Guild link. It's $100 a year. It's totally worth it. It connects you to their network and connects you to their online events, as well as gives you notification of the events that they do in person. They do 2 events a year in person. The awards this week, and in September usually they do a 1-day conference. Our company as well, Sync Summit, has lots of resources. We have a Facebook group with about 7,000 people on it. I invite you to join, with an archive of about 300 conversations with everybody in the music industry, not just in sync. We do courses with music supervisors, and we also do online events. Now, so there's a lot of resources out there other than us too. You can just go and check them out. All right, so one thing that I just wanted to go to for a second is metadata, because it's one of my favorite subjects. And it's one of the subjects, it's boring to people, but I love it. And basically, metadata is super, super important to your success and the success of your artists in the business of sync. Because a lot of the time, we're getting so much music, and that metadata is incomplete. And if the metadata is incomplete, we don't know how to get in touch with you. We don't know how to pay you. We don't know what your music sounds like, and we can't really get a preview of what's going on. And when you're doing a search and you've got a tight deadline and you're trying to pull together music, you don't have time to play detective with every single person who gets in touch with you with music. So, a friend of mine, she's a music supervisor in Mexico, Patty Carrera. Her and I do a lot of work together, and she basically says, look, if I don't see metadata correctly, I throw the music out because I don't have time for it. And I would estimate that that's probably the experience you're going to have with, I will actually put it out there, about 70% of the music supervisors out there are just going to say, you know what? They can't even fill out their metadata. They can't tell me who they are, how to get in touch with them. They don't know how to put their PROs in.
But I think it's an education thing. It's an education thing.
Well, it's an education thing, and that's great. But I'm talking about something really practical, Mary, is that if you don't have it right, you're not going to get the opportunities, and you won't be taken seriously. So it's our job on this side to help you.
Exactly.
to your point, to know what you need to put in
And
there.
I get like we get a lot of managers that will like shoot me a WhatsApp with like a Spotify links, and it's great for me to listen to that, but like dude, don't send me that. Send me the MP3. Send me if the artist is featured with another artist, like just we just don't have time to be going and doing the research. And I know for the managers it's easier, just to send us the links. But like we would never send a Spotify link. Sorry, we would never send a Spotify playlist to a supervisor because they're like, dude, send me
The audio.
The
We
audio.
want them to have the
Well,
audio.
What is that useful for?
Well, I mean, what most music supervisors use nowadays is disco. So,
Yep. Yeah.
I think you have to pay for disco, but
It's worth it.
It's worth it.
It's worth every penny.
It's worth it.
Yeah, worth every penny. It's $9.99 a month. I will connect everybody here. I'm giving so many things here. So Sharon, one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to put together an online discussion with Katrina Balkas from Disco. She's the head of sales for basically North America. And she's not just the head of sales. She's actually one of the best customer service people I've ever seen. And we'll do a chat with her. She'll take you through what disco is, how you should use it, and what it can do for you to empower your artists in your catalog. And what's so great about disco and why it's had adoption by everybody, and I mean really just about everybody, is because it was made by a team of a combination of music supervisors and technologists. So they really understood what was the process that we deal with in our workflow. What are the things that we need when people are sending us music? And that software reflects it. So if there's a takeaway, and I'm so glad you brought it up, Ajani, if there's a takeaway there, really put your music and your artists on disco. It's totally worth every penny you spend. And it will help you to organize your metadata. And it will help you to better connect your music with the music supervision community, because people will say, all right, they've got disco, this is a little bit more serious than just shooting me a Google Drive link. It's a very good thing for you to sign up for.
With one sheets, with instrumentals, with like
a story, a little story, who the writer is, who the artist is, what the genre is, if they've been sunk before, if they were featured in a brand campaign. Little things like that are always like really great little nibbles that people will align to.
I'm seeing if I can pull up a disco page while we're talking, because I want to show you something cool if I can. Anyway, Johnny, go ahead.
Yeah, and then going back to what I was saying, like actually build a personal brand of your artist, or develop a strategy toward music supervisors so you can actually be seen, because at the end of the day we live in a technology world, and the people who get talked about or who get the opportunities are the ones who are generating attention. So, again, we can sit on the computer and we can really pinpoint our strategy or develop tactics toward people we want to target. So as managers, that is something that I would suggest that you look into and you take seriously.
100%. All right, so at this stage, we've got a few minutes. Let's open up for some questions, and then we can wrap things up in like 15 minutes or so. So, does anybody, you had a question, you were the first one, so go ahead and tell us who you are, what you do, and then your question.
Yeah, my name is Angelo. I'm a manager and I have an independent record label. I have an artist that's signed. She's super hot right now. I've had like 20 requests this year for syncing of her songs. Is there a particular base on fees and stuff that you guys
Great question.
that you guys feel comfortable with? Because obviously that's not my expertise, but since I don't have a sync team yet, definitely something that I would want to know. I don't want to do business the wrong way.
So, I'll kick this off real quick. There is no rate card in the sync industry. I can give you ideas off the top of my head that are based on my empirical experience, so real life, for a TV show. I don't want to come out and tell you exactly, because if I say something and then you use it, it might be wrong, because I don't know what the budget of the show is. I don't know what the distribution is. I don't know what markets they're going to have it
In
in.
major situation, like for example, she's done for Fast 10. It's almost there.
Right.
EA Sports hit me up for like 3 games,
Great.
and Netflix and Hulu. So it's like kind of
They're
big.
different medias, all right?
Well,
Yeah,
I would say
different.
Yeah.
that's why
areas.
you need to have a sync agent.
Yeah.
You know, because it's hard to gauge exactly what the deal is
Yeah.
unless we actually see it.
And I think too, what's important is that if she's signed to a publisher, you should ask your publisher what kind of ballpark
Yeah.
fees.
It's not
Totally
she's
independent,
at
right?
this point on that.
100%. Then
Yeah.
it's really difficult because we do a lot of ballparking and what we do, but if we don't have information, it's like improper for us to
We
properly
really
quote.
can't.
you
Yeah.
know?
On my end, it really depends on the budget because I'm working within the scope of the production on the production side. So, I remember one time the director was like, "Hey, like we have a particular scene where there was a Shakira track, and I went to Sony. I called up Sony and I said, "Hey, I want this Shakira track," and they said like $30,000-$40,000 for like 10 seconds, and I went back there like that's too expensive.
Yeah.
But it's Shakira.
Right.
It's Shakira, so you're going to have that. And I'll say as a sync agent, the band, and I'll give you this, and we can speak specifically afterwards, because I'm not going to throw down in public like, you should give this much money. I'm just not going to do that. The smallest sync that I've done in the past year was $1,500. The biggest one is over $500,000 and still getting bigger because it's attached to an ad campaign that is very successful and just keeps expanding. So that's the range that it can be, and it can go beyond 6 figures into 7 figures depending on what the parameters are. So it really has to do with what is going on in the production specifically and what the production is doing in terms of not just its own budget, but what is it doing in terms of distribution? Who's attached to it? There's so many different things.
And like
that
just
can
to
come
give you a
into play.
piece too, like we have Dookie, he's
Yeah.
one of our writers, he's a trapper, he works with Brazilian writers like Ludmila, these are like big artists in their countries.
Yeah.
But like when we go to Hollywood and we're talking to them and saying this is who they are, these are who, Hollywood many times will be like, well, this is all we have. And, and I'm talking about the recording side, not the publishing side, the recording side. And we're like, look, we go back to the labels or indie labels or the managers and say, listen, kind of might have to look at this like a marketing opportunity, but you're getting paid. And you're going to break your artist,
Very.
So you have to be open to that, I think, for film.
I agree 100%. One point I want to make is that based on my experience, like the first time we did a deal for Blackpink's music to be licensed, they were already huge, but they weren't that huge in the US
In the
yet.
US, yeah.
So I just went to the management and I went to YG, which is their label. I'm like, look guys, this is exposure. And they were like, okay, we'll take the small little deal.
Right.
Kind of, so it really depends on
Yeah.
how you want to get it.
Also, people are willing to take those smaller deals when you're opening doors in a new market. Like
Exactly.
if you're getting your song in a Spanish TV show that is massive in Colombia and Mexico and the rest of
Right.
Latin America, or in a Brazilian soap opera, that's gonna be generating so much public performance that you're just going to be like, it's worth
Yeah.
getting it done just for the public performance rather than for the sync fee because it's gonna be minute. But also think about it in a way that you're building your artist's sync history, and if you have something that you already approved as the floor that you've approved, you can start higher from there in the future, and don't feel that you can't ask the music supervisor or hey, what is your budget for this? I was thinking blah blah blah. Is this within your budget? They're like, no, we are blah, and whatever you can do to not kill the opportunity, go for it. And always, if you actually have like a fee in mind and you want quote high, you can always come down. You can never go back up.
100%.
So
Can I
that's
tell a little story about
Wait, let's let Ajani do his.
I used to work in studying music in Brazil.
go on.
If we can, for a second, I wanted Ajani to finish his point, and then you can go.
Well,
Thanks.
I also think you have to be strategic. There like
I'll bring you back in.
like for example, it could be a numbers game, right? So let's say you get 10 syncs for 10,000 in a year, that could be your goal, or it could 10, 15, 20, whatever the case might be. That's six figures. So when you go into it, don't always look for it. Of course, money is important, but when you go into it, just be strategic on how you're going to do that. And if you're trying to break into sync, yeah, I mean, it might not be the biggest sync in the world, but if you get 10 or 20 of those syncs in a year, 18 months, you can make pretty good money, and then you can build on top of that as you grow.
Exactly. It's another point here that goes into that is that this business is a marathon, not a sprint. Like,
Yeah.
Mary, you mentioned Nora Felder. She's been a good friend of mine for over a decade. She's only synced one single song of mine in 10 years. And that's not because she doesn't like me or she thinks the music I represent sucks. Far from it. And a lot of people get into that mindset where they're like, what's wrong with this music supervisor? They hate me. I always give them music, we talk, and they never use it. It's like, no. Your music doesn't fit for the project. When the music fits and everything aligns, it's beautiful. Everybody wins. So you've just got to keep an attitude that this is a long-term play. You've got to do your best to really say every opportunity that comes along, whether it's $1,000 or whether it's huge, it doesn't matter. It's an opportunity. Never throw an opportunity away to further connect your music and connect your artist music with music supervisors. I think that is such a really important thing for you to take away, is that you might have been trying for 6 months or a year. Keep trying, because this business, it's like you will have opportunities that come in from people you never heard of sometimes, and other times you'll have people that you've been talking to, who you're friendly with, and years down the road they'll finally say, you know what, I actually have something for you. So, just keep a good attitude about it and take a long-term view.
Did you want to say something, Addy?
Oh, yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Just a little story about, you triggered me with Brazilian telenovela.
Yeah.
So I used to work at Sony Music in Brazil, and the label, and on the label side, and there was this young singer that they would try to push into Brazil from outside Brazil, and sometimes it's quite difficult to get radio play or to get the promo you need in Brazil if you're not you're singing in Portuguese. And we couldn't get radio play for this single, and we kept going back to radio in Sao Paulo and Rio, couldn't get it done. So we figured out the only way we were going to crack this up was get it onto the telenovela. But the only way we were going to be able to do that was if we gave it to Globo for free.
Right.
Which was like having that conversation, it's just like, it was killing me. But we had to get this track on the telenovela. So then I'm calling up with a manager in London, a young man called Jonathan, and I'm like, Jonathan, we've got to get this track onto the telenovela. It's going to completely change the trajectory of this artist in Brazil.
Yeah.
And finally he was like, okay, we'll do it. I trust you, we'll get it done. And so we got the track on telenovela, and it was every single time the novela opened at 8 p.m. every day for 4 months. The track was rolling in the deep.
Nice.
It became her number 2 market in the world, and she made more money in Brazil for that period, than anywhere else except US and UK, I think it was.
Yeah.
But it really can just make it completely change your trajectory if you do it in the right way at the right time.
It has to be strategic, exactly, and that is such a great point. And I'm not going to be an advocate normally of giving away the music of your artists, but that's why you should look at each deal, because sometimes there's going to be a deal, a new market. It's a slam dunk to give it to a network like Globo so that they can get the word out.
Is somebody over here?
Wait, can I moderate?
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Thank you, Mary.
Oh, no worries.